All right, Shalawam. First and foremost, I would like to give all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Racha Kodash. Next, double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who taught me this truth and rule well. Peace, love, and salutations to you hopeful elect, scattered across the four corners of the earth. I'm your brother Kalak out of the Great Millstone Atlanta camp, coming to you again with another Lord willing edifying video. And in this video, we will be going over Jacob and Esau, okay, which are the two main characters of the Bible, essentially. All right, and the Bible is the script to the movie that we live in. And so the Lord basically created 18 nations biblically. And out of these 18 nations, there are three classifications. You have the sons of God, which are the Israelites, the sons of the wicked, which are the Edomites, and then you have the sons of men, which are the other 16 heathen nations. But in this video, we're going to go over Jacob, which is the progenitor of the Israelites, and Esau, which is the progenitor of the Edomites, okay? And these are the two main characters in the Bible, these two nations of people, okay? This is Genesis 25 and 22. And the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord Yahweh. All right, so this is when Rebekah was pregnant with twins, okay? And the twins were fighting within her womb, Jacob and Esau, okay? Verse 23, and the Lord Yahweh said unto her, two nations are in thy womb, and two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. All right, so the Lord is telling her that two nations are in thy womb. All right, and this goes to show the power of the Lord. The Lord is able to make two different races of people come from two twins, okay? And they split off and become two different nations. And that's exactly what happened. All right, it says, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. All right, so it said the elder shall serve the younger, which Esau came out first. So this lets you know that before Jacob stole the birthright, basically, the prophecy already said that the elder would serve the younger. Verse 24, and when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red all over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. All right, so this is Esau when he came out, and he came out red, which that's the so-called white man. Okay, according to Bible prophecy, Esau Edom is the so-called white man. And this verse right here is just one of the indicators, okay? But there are plenty other scriptures within prophecy to let you know that the so-called white man is the descendants of Esau. Okay, but one clue is right here. He came out red. This is because he had no pigmentation, okay? Everybody on the earth at this time was melanated. But it mentions that he came out red because, again, he was stripped of his pigmentation. So when he came out, they said, whoa, look, he's red, because his blood showed through his skin. Verse 26, and after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. All right, so this is when Jacob came out right behind Esau. And notice it said that Jacob was holding Esau's heel. All right, which Jacob is the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, according to Bible prophecy. All right. Verse 27, and the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. All right. And this is, you could see how this plays out today. All right. The Israelites are more of a chilled, laid back people, and Esau is a cunning hunter. They love to hunt, they love to kill stuff, which, Jacob can do stuff like that too, just, not preferably. All right. This is Genesis 27 and 29. All right, so this is when Jacob's basically stole the birthright, which the Lord had it set up that way. But after Jacob finessed Esau's birthright, this is the blessing that Jacob got. All right, Genesis 27 and 29. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. All right, and basically this is the kingdom of heaven, which is rulership of the earth. All right, this blessing that was given to Jacob is basically a promise that his descendants would rule the earth forever, okay, over the rest of the heathen nations, as it says, be Lord over thy brethren. All right. Now coming down here to verse 34. And when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and said unto his father, bless me, even me also, O my father. All right. So Esau cried out like, Jacob took my birthright. Bless me too. Where's my blessing? All right. Verse 35. And he said, thy brother came with subtlety and hath taken away thy blessing. And he said, is not he rightly named Jacob? For he hath supplanted me these 2 times. All right. And supplant means to basically replace. You know, if there's one king and you take his spot, you've supplanted him. Okay. Continuing on, it says, he took away my birthright, and behold, now he hath taken away my blessing. And he said, hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? Verse 37. And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, behold, I have made him thy Lord. All right, so Isaac is telling Esau, I gave him the blessing. I have made him thy Lord. I already gave him the kingdom of heaven. He's going to rule over all of the other nations, all right, for eternity. So he says, behold, I have made him thy Lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants. And with corn and wine have I sustained him. And what shall I do now unto thee, my son? All right, so he's telling him, I already blessed Jacob and his descendants to rule over all the other nations. Verse 38. And Esau said unto his father, hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. All right, so Esau's crying out, where's my blessing? Verse 39. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. So basically what Isaac is telling Esau is that you're going to be able to rule the earth, but only for a period of time. Okay. Verse 40. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. All right. So there's a whole bunch of clues in here letting you know who Esau is today. All right. Nevertheless, it says, and by thy sword shalt thou live. All right. Who loves the weapons the most in today's world? All right. It's the so-called white man. He loves weapons. That's how he took over the world. That's how he gained all of his rulerships, from the Greeks to the Romans, even to this revived Roman Empire that we live in today. It was all taken by the sword, because that is his blessing. All right. Even now, he threatens other nations with this sword. He's the hammer of the entire earth, because he has the blessing of the sword. All right. It says, and shalt serve thy brother. Now, this is when Esau was serving the Israelites under King David. All right. He was serving his brother, and says, and it shall come to pass when thou shalt have the dominion. All right. So because it said Isaac blessed Esau with rulership of the earth for a period of time. So when it was time for him to rule, then he would break the yoke from off his neck, as it says in verse 40. All right. So basically, Jacob got the blessing of eternal rulership, and Esau got the blessing of a temporary rulership of the earth. Verse 41, and Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. All right. And this is actually the cause of racism that we see today. The enmity between the so-called white man and the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. It actually goes back to this. And actually, furthermore, it goes back to Genesis 3 and 15, but that's for another video. Nevertheless, this is why we see such a hatred towards the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today, because we have their birthright. All right. They may have other reasons for why they say they hate us, but the real reason the so-called white man hates the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans is because of the birthright. This is 2 Esdras 6 and 9. For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. All right. And this actually goes back to when Jacob had his hand on Esau's heel when they came out of the womb. It symbolized this, that Esau would rule the world at the end of one age, and then Jacob would be the beginning of the next age. All right. Because when the Lord returns, Esau is going to be in rulership, but the Lord is going to return, take Esau out of rulership, and then set up the kingdom of heaven. And then the Israelites will rule the world forever. This is Revelation 12 and 9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. All right, now this is when basically the so-called white man fights against the Lord Yahushua when he comes back. It says the great dragon, all right, which is basically the Roman Empire that has been revived today and now known as NATO in the EU, okay? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the European Union basically make up the revived Roman Empire, with America, which is Babylon the Great, being at the forefront of that. Okay. And so these are basically the so-called white man's kingdoms, his rulership. All right. He's the great dragon. It says that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. All right. Because the so-called white man is going to lose terribly when he fights against the second coming of the Lord. All right. He's going to be cast out into the earth, meaning his rulership is going to be no more. Verse 10, and I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our power and the power of his anointed. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our power day and night. Right. So this is going to be the response after the so-called white man is taken out of power. It's going to say the accuser of our brethren is cast down, because that's exactly what Esau is. He's the accuser of Jacob. That's exactly what they do through the mainstream media. They always love to point out or point the finger at the Israelites, even though they are the ones that set up this condition for the Israelites to go off and sin. And that's according to Habakkuk 2 and 15. Okay. So they are the accuser of the brethren, and ultimately that's out of enmity because of the birthright. Okay. So they have to accuse, and really they're just, jealous. Verse 11, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. All right, and this is what's about to happen in the future. Esau Edom, the so-called white man, is about to come down with great wrath because he knows that he has but a short time. All right, as we read in 2nd Esdras 6 and 9, that Esau is the end of the world. So they know who's next up to rule after they go down. The very people that they hate. So they're going to wage war. All right, here at the end of their rulership, they're going to shed blood like never before on the Israelites. This is Joel 3 and 19. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom shall be a desolate wilderness for the violence against the children of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. All right, and this is speaking of what happened here in America. Here, when it's talking about Egypt, this is the new Egypt, as written in Deuteronomy 28 and 68, okay, and Hosea 8 and 13. There would be a new Egypt, all right, and so that's speaking of America, which is Babylon the Great. All right, and it says, Edom shall be desolate. Now, you have to stop here because the first Egypt was ran by Mizraim, okay, the Egyptians. But this Egypt is ran by Edom. So that lets you know it's speaking of America and what happened here when the so-called white man, all right, shed the blood of Judah. This is Romans 9 and 13. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with Yahweh? Yahweh forbid. For he saith to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So then, it is not of him that willeth, nor of him that runneth, but of Yahweh that showeth mercy. For the scripture saith unto Pharaoh, even for this same purpose have I raised thee up, that I might show my power in thee, and that my name might be declared throughout all the earth. So this is telling you that Esau is the modern day Pharaoh. That's basically the movie that we live in, okay? This is going to be the climax. Now, when you go to Jeremiah 23, all right, verses 7 and 8, it tells you about how the Lord would do something greater than the first deliverance out of Egypt. All right, the Lord is about to do a deliverance here in the future that is so big that people won't even speak about the first deliverance out of Egypt. All right. And so that's going to happen here in this age with Esau Edom, the so-called white man, being the modern day Pharaoh. Okay. He's been built up with all of this modern technology and weapons because remember, Esau was blessed with the sword. All right. And so that's because the Lord has ordained Esau to be the villain of this movie, the modern day Pharaoh. All right. So that's Jacob and Esau for you. And this is how it's going to end. Obadiah 1 and 18. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble. And they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord Yahweh hath spoken it. All right, so this is when the Edomites will be completely eradicated off the earth, okay, by the hands of Jacob. And this is going to happen in the kingdom of heaven, as it says here in verse 21, and saviors shall come up on Mount Zion to judge the mount of Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. All right, and this is going to happen after they serve 1,000 years of slavery in the kingdom of heaven. But nevertheless, this is Jacob and Esau. All right, Lord willing, this was edifying. I'm going to end it by giving all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakha Kwadash. Once again, double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace, love, and salutations to you hopeful elect. Shalawam.